Welcome, everyone. Today's regional open call will be very informative and maybe a bit different. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you. And I am Mary Funseth. I'm going to be your facilitator today. The purpose of this call is to provide a venue for networking and sharing about COVID-19 concerns across the settings of healthcare. Superior Healthcare Alliance was formed in 2018 with 8 healthcare organizations across 6 states. We're working to achieve broad national CMS quality strategy aims, and our goal is to collaboratively improve the quality of health and healthcare for consumers, patients, clinicians, organizations, and communities that we all serve. This is why today will be very important to you, because today we're going to bring to you someone who has had a frontline experience, but in the bed, our patient. So all sessions will be recorded. You can bring back folks to listen to this or re-listen yourself. We want to remind you to mute yourself when you're not speaking, and remember to unmute yourself and state your name when you are participating. Please remember, do not disclose any personal health information during your discussions. If you are having trouble with Zoom, you can simply message Elena Smith using the chat box. If you have other questions or comments, please chat them to everyone so that a member of our Superior Health team can address them. We're all happy to help. So please help us foster a positive learning environment when asking those questions and making comments. Remember that we're all here to learn from each other, and note that our patient, Renee, will let you know if it's something that she doesn't want to answer, but I think that you'll be able to ask her lots of questions. So now on to our speaker. Renee is a woman of Wisconsin that, like many of us, was aware of the virus, but was not going to let it stop her. She has owned businesses, and as an adult, has an adult daughter and a great partnership with her husband. They lead an active Wisconsin lifestyle. They have lots of friends. They have a large family nearby. They connected to their rural community frequently, live in Wisconsin during the warm months, and then they travel to the warmer parts of the United States in the winter. They have a fifth wheel, so they utilize it all year long, and they have a lovely place here in rural Wisconsin. This year, they returned to Wisconsin early because Renee's daughter was getting married in Colorado. This all took place just before states started shutting down, and the virus numbers were starting to climb. A number of Renee's family went with her. A few folks within her party did happen to also get COVID-19, but they were not her relatives. But until Renee became ill, did tests really become available. Only Renee then became the most ill due to the virus. Renee will now share with you her personal experience. I want to let you know, please be prepared. It's not an easy story to hear. So I introduce you to Renee. Renee.
Good morning, everybody. I will start with the day that I got back from Colorado after my daughter's wedding, which was March 15th. And I felt great. I went about my week as normal. And on March 21st, I started feeling like I had pulled a muscle in my rib cage after doing some work. I rested for 2 days, iced it, and hot pad like I was instructed, and it wasn't working. Monday morning, I woke up with what felt like bronchitis. I've had bronchitis so many times in my life. It was just basically another day for me. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, bronchitis, not a big deal. Thursday, I woke up and in my mind, it had turned to pneumonia. Again, I've had pneumonia, I don't even know, 5, 6, maybe 7 times in my life. So it's something that I've handled at home before. As the days went on, I was up and down. I would feel good, thinking that everything was going to go back to normal when I woke up. And then I would wake up feeling worse than before. I started to have the digestive issues. I couldn't keep anything down. I was basically living on water, Pedialyte, and Slim Fast for 7 days. Sleeping on the couch. My husband was in our bedroom. On Sunday night, I was to the point that I felt like I was drowning. And we live in 300 square feet, basically, and I couldn't even raise my voice loud enough for my husband to hear me at the other side of our fifth wheel. So I had to text him Sunday night and say, you have to take me to the hospital right now. We went to the hospital that is closest to our home, and I didn't call them to warn them that I was coming, which was just not something I was thinking about. They asked my husband to leave within moments of me being there because they knew what was wrong and they didn't want him to get sick or sicker, depending on if he was or not. I was there for a few hours. They said they were not able to cure me, so they needed to intubate me, put me into a coma, and send me to a larger hospital. This was 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and I said no. The first time they said it, the second time the doctor came in and basically told me that if I didn't do this, that I probably wouldn't make it through the night. So I gave in, and I said, let me at least make a phone call. Give me until 6 a.m. to talk to my husband, my daughter, and my mother. 6 a.m. I made 3 phone calls. Excuse me. Hardest phone calls I've ever made. And within moments after the calls, the team came in and prepared me for intubation. I don't remember any of that. Basically, the countdown from 10 happened. I got to 7, and I don't remember anything after that. I woke up, what was 2.5 days later, and didn't know where I was. I remembered that I was in a different town, but couldn't remember where. I was hallucinating because the level of drugs that they had me on were so intense. I thought that the nurse was trying to kill me. Days after that, I was in ICU, obviously. I begged and pleaded with them to take my tube out because I couldn't stand being awake and having it in me. So they finally took that out. I was the first person to make it out of that hospital, out of ICU. So that was a bonus. I wasn't able to speak to, anyone in my family in the 5 days that I was in ICU. I was alone in a dark room with different nurses generally every 6 hours. So every 6 hours, there was a new face. In the beginning, they wouldn't let me be alone in ICU because my stats were so incredibly unpredictable. As the days went on, I asked them to take out my central line out of my neck. I asked them to take out one of the ones that they had put in my wrist. I started asking them to help me start feeling a little bit more normal. I wasn't able to bathe. I wasn't able to go to the bathroom on my own. It was the hardest experience I've ever had to go through. And then they came in and said, as long as your brain scan and your chest scan go okay, we get to put you up into the respiratory wing. I was very excited to get out of ICU. I felt like I was in a cave. So they covered me up in oxygen mask and took me in for the scan. Everything showed up great, and I was able to go up to the respiratory wing. And it was only then that I was able to get my phone. And this was day 6 of being in the hospital. And I was actually able to call my mother, my daughter, and my husband. This has been 9 weeks ago that I've been out. It was 9 weeks ago on Tuesday. And every time I tell this story, I still feel like this, so I apologize. It was a difficult experience, but it wasn't a bad experience. There were a couple things that I would have liked to have seen different. I couldn't see any of my nurses' faces. I didn't know what any of them looked like. There was no human contact, as I'm sure all of you guys know. But to be able to have my phone, or at least to have one of the nurses hold the phone, so I could have talked to somebody, would have made, I'm so sorry.
You're doing good, Renee.
Would have made such a huge difference to my visit. And I know that those things aren't always possible. But it's one of the things that I think would have helped my mental state a lot. That and maybe being offered a toothbrush or someone to help me brush my hair or anything to make something feel normal. Mary, is there more that you want me to share?
I think you're doing an excellent job, Renee. One of the things that you and I spoke about when we first initially talked was that there were a few things that went well in that I think you said eventually the nurses started to show you possibly their picture, or some did, which was something helpful.
No, that was actually something after I had gotten out of the hospital. Okay. I've seen that there were hospitals throughout the United States that had started putting photos of themselves on their, I don't know what you call them. The word is escaping me right now. That's another thing. My brain is not the same since I was intubated, but on their gowns, that's the word I'm going for.
Oh, sure. Yep.
That they had printed out photos and put photos of themselves on their gowns. And I think it didn't happen for me, but I feel like if that was something that more hospitals could implement, I think it would make a huge difference in people in ICU.
Yes. Well, for everyone, we're not going to reveal where Renee stayed for her two hospital or her clinicians, just out of respect for their privacy. They're both really wonderful places. And I know that, it's really rocked all of your world, those of you who are working directly in those hospitals to care for these folks. A very different way to provide care, and there's so much that you have to do to protect yourself, protect the additional patients, protect this patient. I appreciate the fact, Renee, that you brought forward the situations that really made you feel lonely, because as we all know, as we heal, we also need that human companionship and that human connection. Nurses are so compassionate, and I'm sure their care was compassionate based on what we discussed. But those are some little ways to even up the game a bit, increasing that this patient cannot see you. This patient cannot remember because they're feeling so ill, and they're probably having some sort of delirium anyways. So anything like that would be a help, is what I did pull from some of the suggestions you made. Is there anything else that you would suggest?
Like I said, just, offering somebody a toothbrush, or because it wasn't something that I was thinking about. I hadn't thought about the fact that I hadn't brushed my teeth in 4 days because everything around you was so not normal. That was my first time ever in the hospital, other than when I gave birth to my daughter. So all of this was completely new to me. Having somebody brush my hair at the first hospital, somebody had put it into a braid, which I don't remember, but just having those little things that the patient, I don't think necessarily thinks about until day 6 or day 7 or day 8. Cause I got out on day 9 and my hair hadn't been brushed in 7 days. So anyone with long hair, imagine laying in a bed for 7 days without having your hair brushed, and what that's going to look like.
You bet. Can you talk a little bit about, we have a question. Can you talk about your discharge planning and how your family could or couldn't help?
My family had absolutely nothing to do with the discharge plan. Basically, they came to me, my trio of doctors came to me every day for the last 4 days while I was in the respiratory wing. I didn't necessarily communicate with any doctors when I was in ICU. And every day they basically said, you're improving, your stats are getting better. once your oxygen can get to, between 89 and 92 on a steady basis, then we'll start talking about it. So I was doing everything in my power. I was getting up out of my bed. I was walking to the bathroom. I was doing everything because I just wanted to go home. So the nurses or the doctors came in that morning and said, we're pretty sure that you're going to be able to go home today. And so there's this, this thing in your mind saying, oh my God, I could go home. But then if you don't go home, then what's that going to look like? And so it was, you have to be able to get up and shower on your own. You have to be able to, do these simple things on your own. And then you have to be without oxygen, which terrified me because I hadn't been without oxygen for a while. And the last time I had been without oxygen, I basically felt like I was drowning in my own body. And so they kind of left me in my room by myself. And I basically was just sitting there waiting. And then a nurse came in about 4 hours later and said, put on your clothes, you're going home. And my clothes hadn't been laundered, so they had that hospital chemical smell, which was a difficult ride home. So laundering the clothes would have been lovely. I don't know if that's something that the hospitals can do or not. That one just came to me. But it didn't really seem like it was all that organized. You can go home. Well, when can I go home? You can go home as soon as someone can get here. Okay, well, I'm leaving in 45 minutes then, because that's about how long it's going to take for my husband to come and get me. So I don't feel like that there was a grand plan to let me out of the hospital. I feel like it was kind of last minute, and I don't know if that's a hospital by hospital thing or if that's a patient by patient thing.
I think you're right. And that's something that, that's something that within this network we can also talk about and take that feedback, because I know that you are feeling pretty good right now, comparison, but as you said, you're not great. But can you tell me a little bit about the first, how you felt and what you're able to do in the first 2 weeks of coming home in comparison to what you normally do?
My normal before I got sick is I was working outside 6 to 8 hours a day, trimming trees, cutting down trees, weeding, mowing, mulching, everything that you can imagine that most husbands are doing, I'm doing only on 5 acres. I was cutting down trees with my little chainsaw the day that I felt my first effects, which is why I thought it was a pulled muscle. The day I got home, I got out of the truck, and it was, I'm standing here making the motion. It felt like getting your legs for the first time. It's like when a baby deer is born and you watch them that wobble. That's how I felt. The doctors wanted me walking at least 400 feet a day. And I thought that was comical because I was used to 15,000 steps a day. And 300 feet was a chore. It was like I had to stop every few steps, get my breath. I couldn't go anywhere without my phone. I had to have somebody with me because I'm outside doing this because I don't have that many feet inside my home to do that in. And every day I got out and I tried to walk around my big roundabout, which is 480 feet all the way around. And I almost made it all the way around by the end of the first week. After this, at the end of the second week, I was actually able to walk to my shed, which is about 600 feet away. And boy, was that an accomplishment, which is funny because when you're used to being active and, obviously fully functional, it's an odd challenge to be able to walk that short of a distance and celebrate it. But every day it was basically a new celebration. And then my taste started coming back and food started tasting the way it was supposed to. I lived on Ensure the first 2 weeks that I was home, other than some meals that friends brought me, but most of it I was unable to eat because everything just tasted like salt. Peanut butter tasted like salt. Everything tasted like salt. So I lived on baked potatoes and unsalted popcorn, basically, with my Ensure. So I feel like an 80-year-old woman in a 48-year-old body. But things are a lot better now. So that's, I guess, what I have to look at silver lining.
Can you? I have a question that will take us back to the doctors and nurses who cared for you. But before we go to there, Can you tell me, were you offered any sort of resources for going home, such as, you talk about it's pretty hard to walk. So were you offered a walker or a bath bench or anything like that would help you manage better in your home?
They offered a bath bench. I remember them offering that because I have a bench in my shower in the fifth wheel. They did offer a walker and I declined it. Stop it. Because, I just didn't want that. They offered a lot of mental health options. They offered, if I didn't feel like I was getting better, there was a physical therapist I could go to in one of the 2 towns that I'm near. But the mental health was the thing that they focused on the most. And now I understand why. At that time, I didn't understand why, but now I understand why they focused on the mental health, because it changes you.
Yeah. I have a question from one of our participants that is asking, do you remember anyone from the staff who took care of you? For example, a doctor, a nurse, someone who came by to bring you something. If you do, is there a reason as to why you remember that particular individual? And what they're getting at is so that they could kind of get an idea of how to act around very sick patients. It would be a way for us to pass on that good quality. What was memorable?
There was 2 of them.
Okay.
There was Paul. Paul, and I think one of the reasons I remember Paul so vividly was because he was my only male nurse when I was in ICU. And I kept apologizing every time, and he was one of the ones that had to stay in the room with me. They switched every 6 hours. And I kept apologizing to Paul. I'm like, Paul, I'm so sorry. I need this. Paul, I'm so sorry. Can I have some more ice? Paul, I'm so sorry. I need the bedpan. And he looked a lot like one of my daughter's best friend's fathers. Same name, same build, same hair, same everything. And he was very kind. He stood by my bed. He wasn't on the other side of the room. He listened to me, and he got close enough to me that I could actually see his eyes. And in ICU, it's difficult because it's so dark. So Paul was my first one. The second one, I cannot remember her name, but she was one of the last nurses I had. I mean, I had a new nurse every 6 to 8 hours because they were trying to get all of the nurses hours. The other one, the reason she made such a big impact was because she talked to me. She said, how do you think this happened? How are you feeling? Why at 48 years old do you feel like you got this sick? And she actually sat in the room and spoke to me for a while. And I don't think she was supposed to, just because of the sheer fact of me having COVID. But she took, it was maybe 7 minutes out of her life, where all the other nurses would basically bring me what I needed, take my blood, give me a shot, whatever, and get out of the room, because that's what they were told to do. But this other nurse actually took just a few minutes to talk to me. And it meant the world to me at the time. Still today it does.
We have one more question. Can you talk a little bit about your follow-up medical care, like medications and appointments, calls, home care assistance?
I have not yet, after 9 weeks, physically seen anyone from my team. We do everything on the phone. We do everything online. I requested / kind of made my team remove all drugs from me. I begged them to take me off of the pain meds. I can be a little convincing when I need to be. I didn't have any medication when I went home. I didn't want any medication. I didn't want anything unless it was something that I absolutely had to have. I didn't have any medication going home. I didn't have any physical follow-ups I was dealing with 3 different clinics by the time I got home. And I still have yet to see any of those doctors or nurses face to face. So we've done everything on the phone.
Elena, do we have any other questions in the chat that I missed?
I don't see any right now, but yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat, or you can unmute yourself. And if you are joined by phone and you'd like to unmute yourself to ask a question, you can press *6, just as a reminder.
We do have a statement from one of our attendees. As a former ICU nurse, I appreciate your story and thank you for sharing today for all of us to learn from you, Renee. You are very brave. Are there anything, sorry, I'm getting choked up because I know Renee. I'm so happy she's here because it means that she got healthy. It was a very scary situation in our small community. And we heard she was sick, any one of us could get sick. So Renee, or the question from Nikki, the rest of it is, are there anything ICUs could do to decrease anxiety, making it more comfortable other than what you've already shared, Renee?
I've never been in the ICU, so I don't know if my experience was, quote unquote normal. I think other than not having any, human contact, obviously, but I wasn't able to sleep hardly at all when I was in ICU because I think a lot of it was because I was basically one of the first COVID cases that they had. So everybody wanted to come and see the COVID person. So all the curtains were open and I couldn't sleep. And I had asked a few times for the curtains to be closed, but the doctor wanted to be able to read all my stats from outside the window. There's a sleep issue. I mean, I think it happened in the respiratory wing too, because there's, the nurses are out there talking and I don't always think that they realize the level at which their voices are. And I'm a mom and any little sound wakes me up, even though she's, a grown adult now, but the noise level, was difficult, not being able to have a dark room at night because all the hallway lights were on and all the doctors were out there. And I mean, even the janitorial crew was coming by and like looking in the window. So it felt a little like I was a science experiment. I felt a little like E.T. in that section of the movie where they're all in their big, hazmat suits. That's how I felt. Get off the table. Sorry. So that was difficult, but there's only so much you can do because you're given so many restrictions on, everything you can do with a COVID patient. And I'm sure anybody that has a virus or whatever, I don't know if that's a good answer or not.
No, it is. I think you would share that with many other stories that are out there from anyone who has had to go through a stay in ICU and the hospital. We always joke the hospital is not a place to rest. That's what you get to do when you go home. We have one note of thanks here to you. Thanks so much for sharing your incredible story. And then we also have one more question. How do you feel the virtual meetings went versus having to go in person to see your doctor, the post-care?
I think the virtual meetings were great. I was kind of at a point, even up until maybe 2 weeks ago, I didn't necessarily want to go anywhere. I was having a little bit of anxiety when I had to go anywhere. And I'm an incredibly social person. So for me, it worked out great. I was absolutely fine with it. I'm sure not everybody, it works that way for, but it was good for me at the time because I didn't want to be out in public at all. There are still days now I don't want to be out in public. You're fine.
Any other questions that you see, Elena, as we come into 9:30?
We just got one more in the chat, and that is, do you have any suggestions for healthcare workers to help with a patient's treatment and recovery?
Communication. When I left hospital number 2, they gave me a packet of stuff. No, and here's one thing that I didn't know about. I was told by my one doctor, absolutely no ibuprofen, which I'd been eating ibuprofen like candy the week that I was that I thought I had pulled a muscle and everything else. So I had never been told that ibuprofen was a bad thing. The communication that they gave me and the paperwork that they sent home with me was ideal. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to look out for. Spend as much time as possible on your stomach. Stay away from other people. Don't cook your food. So it was, the communication part of it was the best. Getting the phone call from the nurse every morning, checking to see what my temperature was, but not sending me home with a thermometer because I don't have one. So unfortunately, someone had to go get one for me, bring it out. No contact, obviously, but I don't have a thermometer as a 48-year-old woman with no small children. So it's checking to make sure that the person has a thermometer is a great thing, because my husband and I both had to check our temperature for a week after I got home to make sure that there was no fever involved. Oh,
We have another note of thanks here to you, Renee. We appreciate all you've shared with us today. It is a wonderful opportunity for us to get to listen to Renee. It's a great idea to talk with these patients who have had to go through this. There's so much we can learn and adjust our processes to make this a more successful and comfortable experience. Renee's really opened our eyes up to what we may have assumed, but couldn't even believe that could be true. So I think that was very powerful to listen to Renee's story. It's very vivid and understanding for us to think about. And Renee, we're definitely going to take this. We're a quality organization, along with the folks who are on the call today are from various places around Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota, all providing some form of health care. So we also thank all of you for attending today and taking this information back. Renee, I would highly recommend you take a look at the chat, and we'll make sure we get you a copy of that chat when we're done here, because I think it'll be lovely for you to see all the wonderful wishes people are sending you. In Renee's small town, just a quick to tell you, she, while she's very loved, her town loved her too. And I know she was surrounded by so many friends, incredible, who provided her with services and food and certificates and some, financial donations to help support her through this difficult time. Her husband as well did not get COVID-19, but he definitely had to live through the experience. He had to stay home, of course. He could not work. Of course, this is a huge burden for a family. And Renee has a business, as I mentioned, so she had to take a break from that as well, and is still taking that break because she is a new organic farmer here in Wisconsin, and so she's really had her world rocked, to be honest. Thank you again, Renee.